They say war breaks you. But no one tells you that sometimes the real battle begins at home. Hi, I'm Camille Rivera, 32 years old, a logistics sergeant in the U.S. Army and the outcast of a family that once called me its pride. Before I go further, please like this video and listen to my story till the end. And let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Now, picture this. I'm sitting in a freezing, dimly lit military courtroom. My hands are clenched on a polished oak table, so cold it bites through my skin. Across from me, my brother, Nathan Rivera, polished like a trophy in a $3,000 suit, here to accuse me of falsifying my military record. But the real betrayal? It creaked through the doors behind me. My parents entered with the grace of royalty and the empathy of stone. My mother's red lipstick didn't smudge as she clutched her Hermes purse tighter. My father walked straight past me, eyes forward, affidavit in hand, against me, his own daughter. They didn't stop. Not even a glance. They didn't see the woman who dodged mortar fire in Syria. They didn't see the soldier who once came home with her knees bloodied but spirit unbroken. They just saw a problem. A liability. And they sat behind Nathan. The scrape of their chairs on the linoleum floor was louder than any explosion I'd heard in combat. It wasn't just cold, it was war. They didn't take my side. They took his six. You ever had your breath stolen by heartbreak? Not in romance. In blood. In the people who gave you your last name. They thought I'd stay silent. They thought my silence meant surrender. But in my hand, buried under a trembling fist, was a blood-stained incident log. A truth they didn't know I carried. A truth that could end everything Nathan built. If you've ever had to choose between family and your integrity, drop a broken heart in the comments. I want to see how many of us walked alone when we should have been protected. Back to that courtroom. Colonel Whitmore, the presiding officer, stared at Nathan, waiting for him to speak. And oh, he did. Like a well-practiced actor, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and delivered his lines with the smugness only power can breed. I come here not as a brother, but as a citizen, he began. A soldier must be accountable. Camille fabricated her role during active duty. Fabricated. That word slapped me harder than the desert winds ever did. Stolen valor, he said. Me. The woman who drove supply trucks through kill zones while he drank lattes in Arlington. He called me a fraud for surviving. And as I sat there, swallowing the lump in my throat, my mother sighed. That same disappointed sigh she used when I enlisted instead of going to law school. When I chose grit over gloss. Nathan smiled at me, just slightly. He wanted me to crack, to scream, to prove his lie. But I remembered my training. Panic is a choice. Pain is temporary. But dignity? That's mine. No, sir, I said when asked to speak. I will not make a statement. Flat. Calm. Not broken, but loaded. He didn't know I was chambering my next move. And as I stared at him, at the smug curve of his mouth, I was yanked back to a moment 2 years earlier. The same expression, the same arrogance, the same Thanksgiving day that shattered whatever was left of our family. What happened that Thanksgiving? And how did a returning soldier become the enemy at her own dinner table? Stay with me. Part 2 is coming. It was the first Thanksgiving I'd made it home in 2 years. I'd just returned from a deployment that left more bruises on my spirit than on my skin. I drove up the long, winding road to my parents' estate in Virginia in my beat-up Ford F-150. The engine knocked like it had PTSD of its own. My uniform was still dusty. My hands still smelled like diesel and dirt. But I was alive. And I thought that would be enough. Parked right in front of the mansion? Nathan's brand new Porsche. Jet black. Polished like a trophy. Of course. I stepped inside, boots crunching faintly on imported marble. My mother, Evelyn, greeted me, not with open arms, not even a smile, but with a gasp. A disapproving glance. Camille, she said, eyes darting straight to my boots. Oh, sweetheart, could you please change before you come in? We just had the carpet steam cleaned. That mud. I was stunned. Not. You're home. Not. Thank God you're safe. Just don't dirty the house. I came straight from the airbase, I murmured, duffel bag sliding off my shoulder. Didn't want to miss dinner. She nodded, but it wasn't gratitude. It was an approval checkbox. Then she turned and called into the dining room, "Nathan's carving the turkey." I stood there like a guest in my own home. And when I walked in, the dining table was a scene from a movie. Crystal glasses, gold-rimmed china, candles flickering above an overpriced centerpiece. Nathan stood at the head of the table like a politician, holding court. "Dad," he said, motioning to a long box on the floor. "You've been eyeing those golf clubs. Just a little something from the new DoD contract. Call it a thank you." Inside were custom, gold-plated golf clubs. My father lit up like a Christmas tree. "Nathan, now this. This is my boy," he beamed, clapping him on the back. "You're building a legacy." And I sat quietly with my folded American flag on my lap, the one flown over our outpost in Syria during an ambush. I had brought it for Dad. I thought maybe he'd be proud. But watching him hold that shiny 9-iron, I knew. I slid the flag under my chair with my boot. It didn't belong here. Then Nathan, glass of wine in hand, looked at me and smirked. "So, Camille, how is camping?" He said it like a joke. Like war was a vacation. I bit my tongue. We were out of medical supplies. Our medics were using duct tape to stop bleeding. He laughed. Not even a chuckle, a dry, dismissive snort. "Oh, come on. Don't bring battlefield drama to Thanksgiving. You're not Rambo. You drive a truck, sis. You move boxes. Let's not act like you're out there slaying dragons." The table erupted in polite laughter. My mother giggled. My father wiped a tear of amusement. Then came the final blow. "You're 32, no husband, and still wearing combat boots," my father said between sips. "Maybe it's time to let Nathan hire you. You'd make a decent secretary, finally look like a woman." I felt the stuffing turn to ash in my mouth. They didn't care that I'd just survived an IED blast, that I'd buried friends, that I came home shattered but breathing. They just wanted me to be less loud, less proud, less me. If you've ever sat at a table full of family and felt completely invisible, if you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, comment, "I see you" below. You're not alone. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I chewed my turkey in silence while Nathan twirled his wine glass in the light. Red liquid. Swirling. To him, it was Merlot. To me, it looked exactly like the blood that had covered my hands and my steering wheel just 3 weeks ago. And suddenly I wasn't at that table anymore. I was back in a cab of my Humvee, gripping the wheel, screaming into the radio, while bullets tore through the air like demons. I was back in hell. What really happened in that ambush? And why did Camille sign a report that would later haunt her in court? The truth is coming, and it's covered in blood. The smell hit me first. Burning diesel. Metal. Blood. That awful copper sting that clings to your nostrils and never leaves. We were on Supply Route Bravo, the most dangerous strip of asphalt in northern Syria. A convoy of 12 vehicles, hauling ammo for fluids and hope. I was driving the lead truck. Lieutenant Harris, our convoy commander, sat beside me. 24 years old, a kid from Ohio with freckles and a nervous laugh. He talked about his fiancée back home, like she was made of glass. We were joking about college football when the world exploded. Boom. The security Humvee in front of us vanished in a black mushroom cloud. Metal rained from the sky. Tires rolled across the desert like tumbleweeds. "Contact front," I screamed, slamming the brakes. Then came the gunfire. Ping, ping, thud. Bullets cracked against the windshield. The door panels rattled like bones in a tin can. We were sitting ducks. "Reverse, Rivera. Get us out of..." Lieutenant Harris never finished. A round found the soft spot in the door armor. The sound. God, I still hear it in my dreams. Like someone dropping raw meat on concrete. His blood sprayed across the windshield, painting the sun red. He slumped forward, eyes wide, lips moving but no words. "LT." I shouted, grabbing his vest, yanking him back. "Stay with me, Harris." His gurgles were wet, shallow. The radio crackled with panic. Hitman Actual is down. Repeat, Actual is down. Who's in charge? No one responded. The next officer was 4 trucks back, out of range, his radio fried. Protocol, said we wait. Wait for someone with a higher rank to take over. But we had no time. We were parked in the kill zone, a line of sitting targets loaded with high explosives, and the insurgents were dialing in mortar fire. If I waited for a command, we'd all die. So, I did the one thing I wasn't supposed to do. I took it. I grabbed the radio mic, my hand slipping in Harris's blood. All Victor units. I barked. This is Sierra 1. Actual is down. I am assuming command. My voice didn't shake. Not then. Gun trucks 1 and 4. Suppress Ridge at 3 o'clock. Light them up. Convoy. Push through.
Do not stop.
Bump any vehicle that stalls. And then I drove. Right through the fire. I couldn't feel the steering wheel. My whole body was on fire, pulsing with adrenaline. I called targets. Directed fire. Screamed at drivers to hold spacing. Swore like hell. I didn't care.
We were not dying today.
For 12 minutes, I wasn't just a logistics sergeant. I was all that stood between 15 soldiers and 15 body bags. We made it. We rolled through the base gates, tires smoking, armor shredded. The medics pulled Harris from the truck. He was still alive.
Barely.
Because I had gotten him to the trauma unit in time. That night, back in a tent that reeked of sweat and fear, I opened our grease-stained field log. The Wi-Fi was down. No access to the digital portal. So I did what we always did in the field. I wrote it down by hand. Incident report, mile marker 40. Ambush. Commander down. Sergeant Camille Rivera assumed acting command. No Kia. Cargo delivered. My hand was shaking so hard, the ink bled across the page. There was a smear of blood right next to my signature. Harris's blood. The truth. Ugly, raw, real. That log saved lives. It told the story no spreadsheet could ever capture.
But now?
Now it was being twisted, used as evidence to say I fabricated my rank, that I took a title I didn't earn. All because Nathan wanted to bury me before I got promoted. Have you ever had to break the rules to do the right thing? Ever been punished for it? Type, I did what I had to in the comments if you've been there. Back in the courtroom, Nathan was clicking his laser pointer, presenting a spreadsheet as cold as his heart. On this date, she signed as acting commander, he said with mock sorrow. But there's no record of a field promotion. It's fraud. A clear attempt to pad her record. He was calling my blood-soaked report a resume lie. My parents nodded behind him. That field log, that moment of chaos and courage? To them, it was a threat. A threat to their golden son's contract money. A threat to the version of me they needed to keep in a box. I looked down at my hands, no longer stained with blood, just trembling. But not from fear. From fury. What happens when the truth finally walks in, wearing a uniform and holding a file that could burn everything to the ground? You won't believe what's coming next. Colonel Whitmore sat behind his desk like a mountain carved from judgment. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply said, "We will now enter the field evidence into the record." And that's when it happened. The side door creaked open, and a court clerk stepped in carrying something strange. It wasn't a briefcase. Not a laptop. It was a battered olive green lockbox, its corners dented, its lid sealed with red wax stamped with the emblem of the National Archives. My heart stopped. I knew that box. Inside it was the truth. The original logbook from that ambush. The one with the blood. Nathan's confidence cracked. He straightened his tie. Smiled a little too tightly. But his hands trembled. Whitmore broke the seal with a sharp snap. The box opened, and a faint smell escaped. A smell I hadn't realized I missed. Old paper. Degrading glue.
Sand.
Real war. Real life. He lifted the black leather-bound notebook, worn, warped by heat, stained with fear. "This," he said, "is the battalion's incident log. Not a spreadsheet typed from an office. This was recovered from the field. He placed it under the projector camera. On the screen, side by side. On the left, Nathan's clean Excel document. Sterile. Arial font. Routine transport. It read. On the right, my handwritten log entry. The ink smudged. The signature rushed. And below it, a dark brown stain. A hush fell over the room. Whitmore pointed. Do you know what that is, Mr. Rivera? Nathan didn't speak.
Couldn't.
That, Whitmore said, his voice a steel blade, is dried blood. Likely from the lieutenant your sister dragged out of a burning truck while you were polishing your golf swing. Nathan looked like he'd swallowed glass. But Whitmore wasn't done. He reached into the box again and this time pulled out a single sheet, encased in plastic. A memorandum for record. A sworn statement. Signed by Captain David Harris, Whitmore said, adjusting his glasses. Sent from Walter Reed just 3 days ago. He read it aloud. If Sergeant Camille Rivera had not assumed command, I would be dead. She saved my life. She did not impersonate anyone. She stepped up when the chain of command was shredded by gunfire. Punishing her for that is cowardice, plain and simple. I closed my eyes. The words hit me like wind after suffocation. Not a spreadsheet. Not a fake title. But the truth. Out loud. In writing. If you've ever had to prove your worth against people who should have stood beside you from the start, comment, I remember who I am. Because you don't need their permission to be real. Whitmore lowered the letter. His eyes sliced through Nathan like a bayonet. You wanted to audit your sister's honor, he said. We just did. And we found a soldier.
He turned to me.
Sergeant Rivera, he said, his voice softening. You are cleared of all charges. You acted with valor, courage, and command. You upheld the highest traditions of this uniform. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding escaped from my chest. But Colonel Whitmore wasn't finished. He turned back to Nathan, and his tone dropped an octave.
Cold.
Final. Now let's talk about you. Nathan's face turned gray. Whitmore picked up a document and signed it with one stroke. Effective immediately, your security clearance is revoked. Your company is referred for criminal investigation for contract fraud and malicious prosecution. Nathan stood up, then stumbled, collapsing into the chair like a deflated balloon in a $3,000 suit. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Behind him, my parents sat frozen. My father's hands trembled in his lap. My mother clutched her pearls, so hard they squeaked. Their golden boy had just crumbled to dust. And me? I sat still. Not smug. Not vengeful. Just free. You'd think that'd be the end, right?
But no.
The final betrayal was still waiting, in a hallway, in a voice that used to sing me lullabies. Don't miss the last chapter. You'd think that after being cleared, after truth finally shattered lies, I'd feel whole again. But some scars don't heal just because the bleeding stops. I walked out of that courtroom not as a broken daughter, not as a disgraced soldier, but as a woman who had stood her ground while everyone she loved tried to bury her. And just as I reached the doors of the courthouse, Camille, wait. The sharp click of heels. A rustle of overpriced fabric. My mother, Evelyn Rivera, looked nothing like the proud society wife who'd walked into that courtroom hours ago. Her makeup was streaked. Her hands shook as she grabbed my arm. You can't leave like this, she said, her voice cracking. We need to talk. You have to understand. We didn't know what Nathan was doing. We thought, he said, it was just paperwork, just protection. She was trembling, mascara running. And for a split second, the little girl in me wanted to believe her. But that girl died in the bathroom an hour ago. I peeled her fingers off my sleeve like they were thorns. No, I said. You didn't get tricked. You chose him. Again. Her face twisted. You don't mean that. Camille, we're your family. No, I said softly. You're people I share DNA with. That's not the same. My father appeared beside her, red-faced, tie crooked. Young lady, he started. Don't you speak to your mother like... I didn't let him finish. You held a pen and signed a statement accusing me of lying about a war I nearly died in. You weren't protecting anyone. You were preserving a paycheck.
He didn't respond.
Just shrank. And then it came one last desperate plea. Camille, what are we supposed to do now? My mother sobbed. Nathan's lost everything. The lake house, the club. I looked at her and finally saw it. The truth. She wasn't mourning her son's disgrace. She was mourning the lifestyle built on my silence. And I wasn't silent anymore. I stepped back. My hand was steady. My voice flat. I don't have a home here anymore. And you don't have a daughter. I turned toward my truck. The air was warm. My keys jangled softly as I climbed inside. The engine growled to life, a beautiful sound. The sound of freedom. Halfway down the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Group chat. Alpha Squad. Sarge, we're at Joe's. Wings are hot. Table's loud. And we saved you a seat. You okay? If not, we're on our way. I laughed through a tear. Not the bitter kind. The real kind. I had left my family in that courtroom. But my people? They were waiting for me in a dive bar with greasy wings and open arms. In the center of everything I'd lost, I found something more powerful. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. As I drove toward Joe's bar, sun glinting off my dusty windshield, I thought of something my grandmother used to say. Sometimes God breaks you free by breaking what you're clinging to. And maybe that courtroom didn't just break me free. Maybe it set me on fire. But not to burn down, to become someone new. Thank you for listening. If you felt something, if you saw yourself in Camille, let me know. Share where you're watching from. Because stories like this, they travel farther than betrayal ever could.